The sound of concrete trucks rumbling down Maple Street at 3 a.m. should have been Marcus's first warning, but he was too deep in sleep to hear his life being destroyed, one shovelful of cement at a time. When he stumbled outside in his bathrobe, 12 hours later, coffee mug trembling in his hand, he discovered his $75,000 dream pool had become a gray concrete tomb, and standing in her kitchen window, watching him with cold satisfaction, was the woman who'd sworn she'd make him pay for ruining the neighborhood. What Marcus didn't know was that Margaret Chen had just handed him S moment for 15 years, standing in his backyard on a sweltering July morning, watching the excavation crew break ground for his pool. He felt like he was finally living the life he'd always imagined. The suburban dream two-story colonial, manicured lawn, and now the crown jewel, a kidney-shaped pool with a waterfall feature that would make his neighbors green with envy. "Looking good, Mr. Rodriguez," called out Tony, the crew foreman, as his machine carved through the earth. "Should have this beauty dug out by Thursday." Marcus grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. At 42, he'd worked his ass off to get here, started as a junior accountant at Brennan and Associates, pulling 18-hour days, sacrificing weekends, relationships. His social life fall for this moment. The promotion to senior partner last year had finally put him in the financial position to transform his modest backyard into paradise. "Daddy, is it going to be really deep?" His 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, bounced on her toes beside him, her dark eyes wide with excitement. "Deep enough for you to practice your diving," Mia Marcus said, ruffling her hair. "Just like we talked about. Can we get those floating lights? The ones that change colors?" "Whatever you want, sweetheart. This is going to be the best pool in the whole neighborhood." That's when he noticed her. Margaret Chen stood at her kitchen window, arms crossed, staring at the excavation with a kind of expression most people reserved for witnessing a car accident, even from 50 feet away. Marcus could feel the disapproval radiating from her like heat waves off hot asphalt. Mrs. Chen had been his neighbor for 3 years. Ever since he'd moved to Maple Street, she was one of those people who seemed to take personal offense at any change in her environment. When the Johnsons 2 doors down had painted their shutters blue instead of the traditional white, she'd started a petition. When the city had installed new streetlights, she demanded they be dimmed because they were too harsh. Marcus had always tried to be a good neighbor. He kept his lawn pristine, never played music too loud, always brought in his garbage cans promptly. But Margaret Chen had never warmed to him. If anything, she seemed to view him with increasing suspicion as the months passed. "Mr. Rodriguez," Tony's voice pulled him back to the present. "We're going to need to run some equipment through your side gate? That going to be a problem?" "No problem at all," Marcus said, shooting another glance at Margaret's window. She was still there, watching. "Do whatever you need to do." As the day wore on, Marcus found himself stealing glances at the Chen house. Margaret appeared at her window with clockwork regularity, always wearing the same disapproving expression. By lunch, it was starting to get under his skin. "Why does she keep staring at us?" Sophia asked, following her father's gaze. "Some people don't like change, sweetheart," Marcus said. "Mrs. Chen is just ... set in her ways." But as the afternoon progressed, Margaret's surveillance evolved from passive observation to active intervention. Around 3 o'clock, she emerged from her house wearing a stern navy blazer and clutching a manila folder. "Excuse me," she called out as she marched across her perfectly manicured lawn. "I need to speak with whoever's in charge here." Tony looked up from his equipment, then glanced at Marcus. "That'd be me, ma'am." "Tony Castellano, Aquatic Dreams Construction." Margaret's thin lips pressed into a tight line. "I'm Margaret Chen, president of the Maple Street Homeowners Association. I've received several complaints about this ... excavation." "Complaints?" Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tightening. "What kind of complaints?" Margaret didn't even look at him. She kept her attention fixed on Tony. "Noise violations, for one. Your machinery has been operating since 7 a.m. The HOA bylaws clearly state that construction noise is prohibited before 9 a.m. on weekdays." "Ma'am, we started at 7:30, Tony said patiently, "and we checked with the city. Got all our permits in order." "City permits don't supersede HOA regulations," Margaret snapped, opening her folder. "I have here a copy of the covenant restrictions for this neighborhood." Section 4.2 specifically addresses permanent structures and their impact on property values. Marcus felt his blood pressure rising. Now hold on just a minute. I checked with the HOA before I started this project, filed all the proper paperwork, got approval. For the first time, Margaret looked directly at him. Her pale blue eyes were cold as winter. Did you file for a variance regarding the size specifications? Size specifications? Your pool exceeds the maximum allowable square footage for backyard. Installations in this neighborhood, according to my measurements, you're at least 40 square feet over the limit. Marcus stared at her. You measured my pool? I measured the excavation site. A concerned neighbor brought the potential violation to my attention. What concerned neighbor? Margaret's smile was razor thin. That information is confidential, but I can tell you that as of right now, this project is under review. I'll be filing an injunction with the city planning department first thing tomorrow morning. Tony shifted uncomfortably. Look, lady, I don't know nothing about HOA politics. I just dig holes and pour concrete. But this job is scheduled, and I got other projects waiting. If there's a problem, you folks need to work it out between yourselves. There won't be a problem, Margaret said crisply, because this project will be halted until a proper review can be conducted. Like hell it will, Marcus said, his voice rising. I've spent 18 months planning this pool. I've got permits, approvals, and a contract. You can't just shut me down because you don't like the idea of people having fun in their own backyard. Margaret's expression hardened. This isn't about fun, Mr. Rodriguez. This is about maintaining the character and property values of our neighborhood. Your pool is an eyesore that will affect every homeowner on this street. An eyesore. It's a hole in the ground. It's a symbol of excess and poor planning. The noise, the traffic, the constant parade of workers and delivery trucks, you've turned this street into a construction zone without any consideration for your neighbors. Sophia tugged at Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, why is the lady yelling? Marcus looked down at his daughter, then back at Margaret. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You need to leave. Now, I'll leave when I'm ready to leave, Margaret said. This is still America, Mr. Rodriguez. I have every right to voice my concerns about what's happening in my neighborhood. Your neighborhood? Marcus laughed bitterly. Last I checked, I pay taxes here too. I pay my mortgage, I follow the rules, and I mind my own business. Maybe you should try doing the same. Margaret's face flushed red. Are you threatening me? I'm asking you to leave my property before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. For a moment, they stood there in the blazing afternoon sun, locked in a silent battle of wills. The construction crew had stopped working. Watching the confrontation with the fascinated attention of spectators at a prize fight, finally, Margaret turned on her heel and stalked back toward her house. But before she reached her front door, she called out over her shoulder, This isn't over, Mr. Rodriguez. Not by a long shot. Marcus watched her disappear into her house, his hands clenched into fists. Crazy old bat, he muttered. Daddy, what's a bat? Sophia asked innocently. Nothing, sweetheart. Just a mean old woman who needs to mind her own business. But as Tony's crew resumed their work, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret Chen was just getting started. The way she'd looked at him, the carefully prepared folder, the measured tone of her voice, this wasn't the reaction of someone who'd just discovered a neighbor's construction project. This was calculated, premeditated that evening. As Marcus stood in his backyard surveying the progress, he noticed lights on in Margaret's house. She was moving back and forth past her kitchen window, and every few minutes she'd pause and look out at his excavation site. Planning something, aren't you? He said quietly. His phone buzzed. A text from Tony, weather report showing rain. Tomorrow, might want to cover the site overnight. Marcus looked up at the clear sky, then back at Margaret's house. Something told him rain was going to be the least of his problems. 3 days later, the excavation was complete. The pool's elegant curves were carved into the earth like a piece of modern sculpture, and Marcus felt a surge of pride every time he looked at it. The concrete crew was scheduled to arrive Monday morning to begin the actual construction, and by the end of the week, he'd have his dream pool. Margaret had been conspicuously absent during the excavation. Her house remained dark most evenings, and Marcus had begun to hope that maybe she'd given up on her crusade against his pool. Maybe she'd realized that her threats. Marcus didn't call the police. He didn't storm over to Margaret's house screaming. He didn't even call his lawyer yet. Instead, he did something that would have surprised anyone who knew him. He went to work at Brennan and Associates, Marcus. Rodriguez was known for his methodical approach to complex financial investigations, corporate fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. He'd built his reputation on his ability to follow money trails that others missed, to find the smoking gun hidden in mountains of paperwork. His colleagues called him the Bloodhound because once he caught a scent, he never let go. Margaret Chen was about to discover why. "Morning, Marcus," said Jennifer Walsh, his assistant, as he walked into his corner office Monday morning. "How was your weekend? Did you get your pool finished?" Marcus set down his briefcase and turned to face her. Jennifer had been with him for 3 years, long enough to recognize the dangerous calm in his voice when he was truly angry. "Change of plans, Jen. I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the week." "The rest of the week? But you have the Morrison audit. Reschedule it." "Everything. I'm working on a special project." Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "What kind of special project?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of his concrete-filled backyard, the kind that requires very careful documentation. 2 hours later, Marcus's office looked like a war room. He'd covered his conference table with manila folders, legal pads, and printed documents. His computer displayed multiple browser Windows City records, HOA bylaws, contractor licensing databases, and property ownership histories. "Mr. Rodriguez." Jennifer appeared in his doorway, looking concerned. "I've got David Morrison online. 3. He's not happy about the reschedule." "Tell Morrison I'll call him back," Marcus said without looking up from his laptop. "And Jen, I need you to make some calls for me." "What kind of calls?" "I want you to contact every concrete contractor in the city. Find out which one did an emergency fill job on Maple Street early Saturday morning. When you find them, I want copies of their work orders, contracts, and payment records." Jennifer scribbled notes on her pad. "It's going to take a while. Most of those companies don't just hand over their records. Tell them it's for a legal investigation. If they refuse, have them call me directly. Legal investigation." "Marcus, what's going on?" Marcus finally looked up from his screen. "Someone destroyed $75,000 worth of my property, Jen, and they were stupid enough to leave a paper trail." By noon, Marcus had already uncovered the first piece of the puzzle. The concrete work had been done by Riverside Construction, a mid-sized company that specialized in emergency repairs and city contract work. When Marcus called their office, the receptionist was surprisingly helpful. "Oh, the Maple Street job," she said. "That was a Saturday emergency call. Really unusual. We don't normally do residential fills on weekends. Who authorized the work? Let me check. It says here the work order came through the city planning department. Emergency hazard abatement." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Can you tell me who signed off on it?" "I'm sorry, sir. I can't give out that information over the phone. You'd need to file a formal request. I understand. Can you tell me if the homeowner was present when the work was done?" There was a pause. "That's the weird thing. The work order specifically said the homeowner had been notified, but your guy seemed really surprised when he came outside. Made quite a scene, actually, my guy, the foreman, Jimmy Kowalski. He said the homeowner was pretty upset, claimed he didn't know anything about the fill order." Marcus thanked her and hung up, his mind racing. Margaret hadn't just arranged for his pool to be filled, she'd somehow convinced the city it was an emergency hazard that required immediate action. But how his phone rang. "Jennifer, Marcus, I just got off the phone with someone from the city planning department. They're saying there's no record of any emergency fill order for your address." "No record?" "None. Said if there had been an emergency order, it would have gone through their office and they'd have documentation." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing this information. If the city had no record of the order, then where had it come from? Someone had impersonated city officials to arrange the concrete job. That wasn't just property damage, that was fraud. "Jen, I need you to do something else for me. Call our friends at the district attorney's office. Ask them about the procedures for filing charges related to property destruction and impersonation of city officials." "Marcus, are you sure you want to go down this road? Maybe you should just file an insurance claim and move on." "I'm not moving on," Marcus said quietly. "Not until I know exactly how this happened and who's responsible. That afternoon, Marcus drove to the city planning office. The building was a squat, beige monument to bureaucratic efficiency, filled with the kind of fluorescent-lit maze that could drive a sane person to madness. But Marcus navigated it with the patience of a man on a mission. "I need to speak with someone about emergency work orders," he told the clerk at the information desk. 20 minutes later, he was sitting across from Patricia Valdez, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd been handling emergency permits for the past decade. "Mr. Rodriguez, I've pulled all the records for your address going back 2 years," she said, flipping through a thick folder. "There's no emergency order on file. No hazard abatement request, nothing. But the concrete company said they received an official work order through your department." Patricia frowned. "That's impossible. All emergency orders go through me personally. I sign off on every one, and I keep meticulous records." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her the photo of his concrete-filled backyard. This work was done early Saturday morning. The contractor said they had city authorization. Patricia's frown deepened. "Mr. Rodriguez, if someone told a contractor they had city authorization for this work, they were lying. This is fraud. You need to file a police report." "I intend to. But first, I need to understand how someone could have fooled a construction company into believing they had official authorization." Patricia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Between you and me, it's not that hard. Most contractors don't verify emergency orders, they just want to get paid. If someone called them with the right official language, claimed it was urgent, and offered to pay in cash, they'd do the work first and ask questions later." "Exactly. But Mr. Rodriguez, whoever did this knew enough about city procedures to make it sound legitimate. This wasn't some random prank. This was planned." Marcus left City Hall with a growing sense of certainty. Margaret Chen hadn't just arranged to have his pool filled, she'd orchestrated an elaborate fraud to make it happen. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated him that evening. Marcus sat in his home office, surrounded by the evidence he'd collected. Phone records, contractor documents, city permits, HOA correspondence. It is all there, painting a picture of systematic harassment that had culminated in the destruction of his property. But he needed more. He needed proof that Margaret was behind it all. His doorbell rang. Marcus glanced at his watch. 8:30 p.m. Too late for solicitors, too early for emergencies. He walked to his front door and looked through the peephole. Margaret Chen stood on his doorstep, holding a manila envelope. Marcus opened the door, but kept the chain lock engaged. "What do you want?" "I wanted to apologize," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "I heard about what happened to your pool. Such a shame. Cut the act, Margaret. I know you're behind this." Margaret's expression didn't change. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean. I brought you some information that might help with your insurance claim." She held up the envelope. Documentation about the safety hazards associated with open excavations in residential areas. "I thought it might explain why the city acted so quickly to remediate the situation." Marcus stared at her through the gap in the door. The woman had balls, he'd give her that. Standing on his doorstep, pretending to be helpful while gloating over her handiwork. "Keep your documentation," he said. "I've got plenty of my own." Something flickered in Margaret's eyes, a brief flash of uncertainty. "What kind of documentation?" "The kind that proves fraud, conspiracy, and property destruction. The kind that comes with criminal charges." Margaret's smile faltered. "You're being dramatic, Mr. Rodriguez. Sometimes unfortunate things happen. The important thing is that everyone is safe." "Safe." Marcus laughed bitterly. "You destroyed my property, Margaret. You impersonated city officials to do it. You think I'm going to let that slide? I think you're going to have a very difficult time proving anything," Margaret said, her voice hardening. "And I think you should be very careful about making accusations. You can't support." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Rodriguez, you might want to check your mailbox. The HOA board met this afternoon. There are some new regulations you should be aware of." Marcus watched her walk back to her house, his jaw clenched. He waited until she was inside before opening his front door and walking to his mailbox. Inside was a thick envelope marked Maple Street HOA. "Urgent." Marcus ripped it open and read the contents by the light of his porch lamp. It was a formal notice of violation, signed by Margaret Chen as HOA president. According to the document, his backyard now violated multiple neighborhoods. Marcus spent the next 3 days learning everything there was to know about Margaret Chen, not just the surface details, her job as a retired city planner, her widowed status, her obsession with neighborhood regulations, but the deeper secrets that people like Margaret always tried to hide. What he found was a woman who'd built her entire identity around control and compliance. Someone who used rules and regulations like weapons against anyone who threatened her sense of order. But, more importantly, what he found was a woman who'd made the same kinds of mistakes she was now trying to pin on him. The first crack in Margaret's armor came from an unexpected source, her own HOA filings. "Look at this," Rebecca said, spreading documents across Marcus's conference table. Margaret's been filing complaints about various neighbors for the past 5 years. But here's the interesting part. She's also been filing permit applications for her own property. Marcus studied the paperwork. What kind of permits? Garden structures mostly. A gazebo in 2019, a decorative pond in 2021, and last year. This is interesting. A home office edition. What's interesting about a home office? Tom looked up from his laptop. I've been cross-referencing her permit applications with the city's approval records. The gazebo was approved, but the home office edition, no record at all, none. According to the city, she never received a building permit for the addition. But if you look at Google Earth satellite images from last year, Tom turned his laptop around, showing aerial photos of Margaret's property. There it is, a substantial addition to the back of her house. Marcus stared at the images. Margaret's house clearly showed a new structure that hadn't been there in previous years. A large addition that extended into her backyard, an addition that, according to the city records, had never been approved. "How big is that addition?" Marcus asked. Rebecca pulled out a measuring tool and calculated the dimensions. Approximately 400 square feet. For a structure that size, she'd need building permits, electrical permits, plumbing permits, if there's a bathroom, and an inspection from the city. And she has none of those. None that we can find. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Margaret Chen, the woman who'd destroyed his pool for being 40 square feet over the HOA limit, had built a 400 square foot addition without any permits at all. "There's more," Tom said, pulling up another set of documents. "I found her original HOA application from when she moved to the neighborhood. She listed herself as semi-retired and claimed she was only planning to use her home office for personal correspondence and volunteer work. But I did some digging into her business records. Margaret Chen runs a consulting firm called Neighborhood Solutions, LLC. She's been operating a full-scale business out of her home for the past 3 years, client meetings, document storage, the works. That's a commercial operation in a residential zone." Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. Zoning violation. Exactly, and here's the kicker: she's been advertising her services online. I found her website, her LinkedIn profile, even some client testimonials. She's been brazenly operating an illegal business while serving as HOA president. "Jesus," Marcus breathed. "She's been playing compliance police while breaking more rules than anyone else on the street." His phone rang. Detective Kim. "Mr. Rodriguez, I've got some updates on your case. Can you come in this afternoon?" "I'll be there in an hour." "Mr. Rodriguez, bring that documentation you showed me. I think we're going to need it." At the police station, Detective Kim was waiting, with a thick file and a grim expression. "We've made some progress," she said, gesturing for Marcus to sit. "The concrete company kept better records than we expected. We've got copies of the original work order, and it's definitely fraudulent." "How can you tell?" "The city seal is wrong. It's close, but not exact. And the authorization codes are fake. They don't match the city's numbering system. Whoever created this document knew enough to make it look official, but they made small mistakes that give it away." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction. "So you can prove it was fraudulent?" "We can prove the document was fake, but we still need to prove who created it." That's where things get interesting. Detective Kim opened her file and pulled out a photograph. "This is a security camera image from the FedEx store on Elm Street. It shows someone dropping off a package early Friday morning, the day before your pool was filled." Marcus studied the grainy image. It showed a figure in a dark jacket and baseball cap, but the face wasn't clearly visible. The package was addressed to Riverside Construction. Detective Kim continued. Inside was the fraudulent work order and a cashier's check for the full amount of the job. Can you identify who sent it? Not from the image, but we can identify the check. It was purchased at the grocery store, 2 blocks from the FedEx location. Same day, about an hour earlier. Marcus's mind raced. You're building a timeline. Exactly, and here's where it gets interesting. The grocery store has security cameras too. We're getting those records this afternoon. What about phone records? Someone had to call Riverside Construction to arrange the job. Detective Kim smiled grimly. Already on it. We've got a subpoena for their phone records. If someone called them about the emergency fill job, we'll find that call. Marcus left the police station feeling like the noose was tightening around Margaret's neck, but he wasn't content to wait for the legal system to catch up with her. He had his own plans. That evening, Marcus stood in his backyard, staring at the concrete slab while talking on his phone with David Morrison, his environmental consultant friend. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, Morrison was saying an unpermitted home office addition could potentially create runoff issues that affect groundwater. That's right, Marcus said, especially if they didn't install proper drainage or if they altered the natural water flow around the property. And if that runoff was affecting neighboring properties, then we'd be looking at potential EPA violations, city code violations, and civil liability for property damage. Marcus smiled as he looked at Margaret's house. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to file a complaint about potential groundwater contamination, what would that process look like? You'd need to file with the city's environmental department and the EPA. They'd do soil testing, water, quality analysis, the works. It's a pretty intensive process. It's how intensive. They'd basically shut down any ongoing activity on the property until they could determine if there was contamination. Could take months, and if they found violations, fines, mandatory remediation, potential criminal charges if the contamination was severe enough. Plus, the property owner would be liable for any damage to neighboring properties. Marcus thanked Morrison and hung up, his mind already formulating his next move. Margaret had used city regulations as a weapon against him. It was time to return the favor. The next morning, Marcus was back at City Hall, but this time he was visiting a different department. The Environmental Compliance Office was located in the basement, a fluorescent-lit maze of cubicles staffed by serious-looking people in lab coats. I'd like to file a complaint about potential groundwater contamination, Marcus told the receptionist. 20 minutes later, he was sitting across from Dr. Elena Vasquez, a stern-looking woman who specialized in residential environmental violations. Mr. Rodriguez, these are serious allegations, she said, reviewing the complaint form Marcus had filled out. You're claiming that an unpermitted addition to your neighbor's property is causing runoff that's affecting your groundwater. That's correct. The addition was built without proper permits or drainage considerations. I've noticed changes in my soil moisture and some unusual odors that suggest contamination. Dr. Vasquez made notes on her pad. Have you had any independent testing done? Not yet. I was hoping your department could handle that. We can, but I need to warn you, if we find that your complaint is frivolous or malicious, there can be legal consequences. Marcus met her gaze steadily. I understand. I'm not making this complaint lightly. All right, we'll schedule a preliminary site inspection for next week. In the meantime, I'll need you to document any changes you've noticed in your properties. Water quality or soil conditions. What happens if you find violations? If we find evidence of contamination or improper drainage, we'll issue a stop work order and require immediate remediation. Depending on the severity, we might also refer the case to the EPA or the district attorney's office. Marcus left City Hall with a spring in his step. Margaret Chen was about to discover what it felt like to have her property rights trampled by bureaucratic red tape. But he wasn't done. Over the next few days, Marcus systematically filed complaints with every relevant agency he could find. Zoning violations with the city planning department, building code violations with the housing authority. Each complaint was carefully documented, supported by evidence, and filed through official channels. Marcus had learned Margaret's game, and he was playing it better than she ever could. On Thursday morning, Marcus was enjoying his coffee in his kitchen when he saw the first city inspector arrive at MAR.